The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Let us pray. Loving God, we give you thanks for the incredible blessings of our lives and of our state. As the beautiful springtime springs forth, we're reminded of new life and new opportunities to help make our beloved Minnesota a place of goodness, beauty, and vitality for all who call our state home. We thank you, God, for the dedicated women and men here at the Capitol who place their gifts and their very lives at the service of the people of Minnesota. We ask your blessing upon all who are gathered here as we begin this session. For our elected officials, we pray for a spirit of inspiration and openness, of humility and courage, that they might find paths to unity and be thoughtful stewards of our state's most precious resources. For all staff members and those who work with our legislators, we pray that they may be encouraged in their work, provide wise counsel, and strive toward the good. And for the nonpartisan staff who work tirelessly for the building up of our great state, we pray for a continued spirit of generosity and for blessings upon all their efforts. May all who work together in this session strive to care for those who are voiceless, vulnerable, and most in need. Help all who are gathered here to work together for what is right and good and true, now and always. We ask this in your name, O God. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Father Nate Wills, chaplain of the Fighting Irish football team, University of Notre Dame, Indiana. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. Members, if you can take your conversations off of the House floor into the alcoves or the retiring room. Thank you. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 91st Session, 2019, 33rd day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Friday, April 5th, 2019.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. Comparison reports. There is a copy of this order of business on each member's desk. If there is no objection, the motions will prevail. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail and the substitutions will be made. Second reading of Senate files.
Second reading, Senate file number 2130.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The Chief Clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 2825 through 2826.
First reading, House Files 2825 through 2826. Messages from the Senate.
Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate files herewith transmitted. Senate file numbers 75 and 558. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading, Senate file number 75, an act relating to public safety. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. First reading, Senate file number 558, an act relating to state government. Pinto moved that Senate file number 558 and House file number 300, now in the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 1339. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate file number 1339, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to transportation.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Youakim. To your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bipartisan bill would make a modest but important change to the Minnesota Traffic Code. I would like to thank Senator Carla Nelson for carrying this bill through the other body on a 65-0 vote. It's the bill you see before you today. I would also like to thank Representative Runbeck for being a co-author. The need for this change was made clear due to a traffic light rail accident that caused the death of 29-year-old Nick Westlake and severely injured his fiancée, Nellie Petkova. Today, we're joined in the gallery by Nick's family, his parents, Lisa and Bob Westlake, his brothers, Seth and Peter, and his grandmother, Christine Redlin. I would like to personally thank Peter and Seth for being at every hearing to testify for this specific change and for being such amazing advocates for your brother. Nick and Nellie were traveling in their car together and were crossing University Avenue on a green light. The light rail train traveling on University Avenue approached the intersection with a red traffic light, and the light rail stop signal, the vertical white bar, illuminated. The operator simply failed to stop. And Metro Transit videos show very clearly that both signals were telling him to do so. When he drove through the stop signals, the train stuck Nick's car, and despite heroic efforts by bystanders and first responders, Nick died from his injuries. The investigation shows that the operator was at fault, but Minnesota's careless driving statutes does not apply to light rail operators. It applies to vehicles, which excludes devices used exclusively upon stationary rails or tracks. Because of this statute, the operator cannot be and was not charged with any crime, not even misdemeanor careless driving. If he were driving a Metro Transit bus, he could have been charged with careless driving. Nick's brothers shared with the committee members the conversations they and their family had with prosecutors, conversations where they were told that no charges would be filed, even though the evidence clearly showed that the driver was at fault. It is heartbreaking that after the tragedy the family endured, they could not even receive the small comfort that some level of justice would come. This bill would simply make the reckless and careless driving statutes apply to light rail operators like it does to bus drivers. It closes a gap in current law. If passed, the operator who caused this accident cannot be charged, but Nick's family and I both believe that this law needs to be changed. Nick's family and friends have worked tirelessly since the accident to bring attention to the need for increased safety around the light rail system. This bill is a first step in that process. It will not prevent every accident, but hopefully by passing this bill today, we can take this first step towards having some small good come out of a senseless tragedy.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moves to amend Senate File number 1339 as follows, and the amendment is coded A1.
The member from Anoka, Representative Runbeck, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And first of all, thank you to Representative Youakim and also to the Westlake family for what we know they have suffered, and we want to just offer our condolences to them, but also thanks for their determination to participate and to actually drive the fixing of this law. The A1 amendment would do a couple things. I think we want as comprehensive an approach as we can, and this would say that, first of all, there should be a camera in every cab of the vehicle in which the driver is sitting, so that there would be some evidence as to what the driver was doing at the time. Currently, there is no camera in any of the light rail train cabs. It would also require the Metropolitan Council to bring us a light rail safety report next fall, so that they are taking a look at what might be some additional features, safety measures, cross arms perhaps at crossings, that type of thing, that would need to be added to the system that we have to ensure better safety. So that's basically what this does. This particular language was in the public safety bill, and it came out probably just more of a glitch than anything. But I think this is important language to retain and to move forward with.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to a point of order under 3.21a. Motions and propositions must be germane, and I'm prepared to offer advice.
State your advice.
Madam Speaker, Rule 3.21a does require the primary amendments be germane to the bill under consideration. That is, they can't have a substantial change in the scope or purpose of the bill. The amendment in question does have such a substantial change by adding this requirement of a camera and having a feature study. That's traditionally measured by whether it makes a change to the same chapter or section of law. This is a completely different chapter of law, 169 versus 473, and would require a major change in the title. For all these reasons, Madam Speaker, I would ask that you find the point of order well taken.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Advice, plain and simple, this bill is about safety on our light rail system. We have a lot of work to do in that area, and that's why this amendment is very much in keeping with what the bill is about.
I've had the opportunity to review the amendment and the bill and taken the advice of Representative Pinto and Runbeck. I find the point of order well taken. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moves to amend Senate File number 1339 as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
The member from Anoka, Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this amendment does, I think, make complete the closure of the loopholes in our law. There are numerous provisions in our driver safety laws, and they all come under sort of a heading and a definition of what a motor vehicle is. And to that, we would add that the light rail train vehicle is a motor vehicle, just as a bus, a truck, an automobile are. And that way, all the provisions about driver safety would apply to the light rail operator situation. So we're talking about vehicles that operate the same space, and they should have the same rules. And this, in I think, my view at least, and perhaps others, it would complete the bill and make sure that as we're going through this process, as we are completing and passing a bill, that it will in fact do what we want it to do, which is to close all of the loopholes on the light rail train operator and the safety.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment is a delete-all amendment that applies to a variety of provisions in the traffic code to light rail operators, except, as the language in the amendment itself notes, for those provisions which by nature cannot reasonably apply to light rail transit vehicles. I think that language is far too broad and vague and would create all manner of problems. I don't think any police officer or prosecutor wants to be put in the position to determine whether something can reasonably apply to light rail vehicles. The approach we take in the bill before us is much more direct. I would like to keep the bill in the shape that is before us and would ask you to vote no on this amendment.
Discussion. Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're talking about standards that are the same across all the different driving offenses. I mean, do we want these drivers to comply with the rules on stopping for school buses? Do we want them to comply with the rules on stopping for a blind person in the crosswalk that is carrying a white cane? Do we want them to apply or comply with the rules on texting while driving? I mean, this is what we're talking about, and these should be just sort of standard across the board rules that affect all vehicles. So if we don't want to leave any ambiguity or any open questions about what rules apply to this type of vehicle, we need to pass this bill, and I would call for a roll call vote.
Representative Runbeck requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Wright, Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to speak in favor of this amendment. I offered the language of this amendment in the Public Safety Committee last week and to the Public Safety Omnibus Bill that we were discussing, and unfortunately, it was not adopted. I would hope that on the floor here we could adopt this because there, as the amendment author Runbeck mentioned, there are numerous existing ordinances that would and should apply to light rail transit operators. She mentioned a couple of them, and I'll just emphasize. Blind person carrying a white cane. Should that reasonably be applied to a light rail transit operator? I think so. Safety of school children and the duties of other drivers. Absolutely it should. How about the use of a wireless communication device? Should that apply? I think so. So members, please vote green on this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Actually, the wireless device is already prohibited by the own rules for Met Transit, but I worry about the ambiguity that this amendment creates by the own language you have in it, which is for those provisions which by their nature cannot reasonably apply to light rail transit vehicles. This amendment picks and chooses different parts of 169 to apply, and some of those are things like speed limits, zones, radar, who has the right-of-way in a turn lane. They clearly don't apply to light rail trains. Members, this is a simple bill that the family brought to us to correct a problem that greatly impacted their lives and that will help others. There's very few times in this body that we can do something this simple and plain to make things better for folks and to give some family a little bit of closure for what they went through. I ask you to vote no on this amendment because we've already passed this bill in the other body 65-0, and it can go right to the governor.
The member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, I speak in favor of this amendment. The operators do need to follow the same laws as everybody else, especially on the green line. If you look at the green line, there's no safety devices to stop pedestrians from walking on the tracks when the trains are going by. There's not even crossing arms for the traffic. These operators, especially on the green line, need to be very cautious in looking what they're doing and making sure that they do follow the laws. If they have a stoplight, they should stop. Under the current law, they don't have to stop and there's nothing we can do. They need to be able to accountable for the things they do just like everybody that's using the roads.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to clarify something. We did hear an amendment in public safety, but it was not the same as this amendment. The ACE 11 amendment was what we heard in public safety, and that was in regards to a completely different provision, 169A.20. And as I pointed out in that committee, the definition for light rail was already included under some of the provisions that were referred to. So that was a different amendment that was presented in public safety. I will be voting no today on the amendment.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the author of the underlying bill would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Lucero.
Representative Youakim mentioned that speeding was among those items that should and could not reasonably be applied to a light rail transit operator. Why not?
Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative. I actually said that some of the provisions in there cause gray areas and ambiguity in how it can be applied. One of those also was crossing a fire hose. So this creates more ambiguity in the law, which I don't want our police officers and prosecutors having to decide when the whole point of this law is to make it crystal clear that reckless driving applies to light rail operators just like it does to their colleagues who drive transit buses.
Representative Lucero. Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I mean, I think the raising the concern that there's ambiguity in stating specifically which laws apply, which my amendment does, it seems odd. I mean, I think you have more ambiguity if these are not included, because we're talking about 169.06, obedience to traffic control signal, 169.09, collisions, drivers must stop for following collisions. I mean, you could go on and on here. So many, many, many provisions that clearly must apply equally to the operator of a light rail vehicle, as they do to drivers right now.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author of the underlying bill please yield to a question?
She will. Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So we're trying to apply at least a couple of the rules here to light rail operators. And if a police officer witnesses reckless behavior of a light rail, what's the process for the police officer for pulling over a light rail train?
Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Munson, I think you bring up a good point. This is something that probably should be discussed in a committee so we could have those in-depth discussions. I have told Representative Runbeck over and over again that I'd be more than happy to address some of these concerns she has in a separate bill this year or next year. But this is a simple bill to clear up a reckless and careless driving statute that has a loophole in it. If we pass this bill today, which I really hope we do, it can go right to the governor to be signed. And we can address some of these other issues in other bills where they belong.
Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question was actually to the underlying bill. Representative Runbeck is trying to add some provisions to make sure that light rail transit drivers are following rules that other drivers on the road have to follow, such as the hands-free texting thing, which may be against the rules for light rail transit operators in their manual, but unless there's actually a provision in law that says that they can be fined or face a misdemeanor charge for texting while driving or using their phone while driving, I don't know how it's enforced. And so my question on the underlying bill about reckless driving or careless driving, how will that be enforced if a police officer sees a light rail train entering an intersection after the light is red for the light rail or white bar or whatever it is? If they witness a light rail train operator conducting careless driving, how will a police officer enforce that law? Or is it the Metro Transit police officers that are supposed to be policing the drivers?
Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Munson. Once again, the underlying bill, which you're asking about, simply addresses reckless and careless driving. And if I can point you to lines 2.8 to 2.9, the operator or passengers on a light rail transit vehicle is, 2.6 to 2.9. Any person who operates or halts a light rail transit vehicle carelessly or heedlessly in disregard of others or causes in danger can be charged with a misdemeanor. So there are repercussions within the underlying bill. They can be charged with a crime. We are simply trying to fix the careless and reckless driving standard in this bill. I would prefer to keep it clean so it can go right to the governor so this family can have some closure.
Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the author of the bill would continue to yield, she still hasn't answered my question on how this provision in her bill will be enforced. Are we waiting for an accident to occur and someone to be killed again before they can be charged with a misdemeanor? Or is it the interest of the bill's author, or the intent of the bill's author, to actually create a law that can be enforced if we see reckless driving occurring on the street or on the rails where someone actually isn't killed? Can we actually track down this driver and give them a ticket for reckless driving? Because we're talking about giving a ticket to the operator, not to Metro Transit. And I'm wondering how this law would be enforced if it passes as is without the amendment. Because if we can't enforce the underlying law, if we can enforce it, then I think we should be enforcing other laws. But if we can't enforce it, then it's a law that can't be enforced. I don't know what we're doing.
She will yield. Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The underlying law allows us to enforce it because right now it does not apply to a light rail driver. So currently, you could be a transit driver on a bus one day and it applies to you, and the next day, if you're driving the light rail, it doesn't. We're trying to create an even playing field. They can be charged with a misdemeanor, and it would be applied just like it does with bus drivers. That's the point of the underlying bill. I don't know how much more clear I can be.
Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the author of the bill would continue to yield, my question is which law enforcement agency would be enforcing this? Is this city police officers chasing down a train and pulling it over to hand out a ticket for reckless driving, or is it the Metro Transit Police that would be pulling over a train to stop them and hand out a ticket for a reckless driving? That was my question for the bill's author, if she'll continue to yield.
She will yield. Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Munson, any police officer is allowed to enforce the traffic law. So this could be St. Paul, it could be Minneapolis, it could be the transit police, and they would stop this vehicle like any other vehicle.
Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the bill's author.
The member from Chisago, Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, as I've listened, I think that my colleagues have given lots of good reasons to accept this amendment, and I'm not sure that we've gotten real compelling reason not to. We've been told that it's already passed the Senate, and so we can move this quickly and it can go right to the governor. I'm not sure that's in our best interest. I don't know why we wouldn't want to get it right rather than do it fast. We've also been told that if this goes to the governor, that we can still work on this and get some fixes this year. Again, I'm not sure why we wouldn't add this amendment and include those additional safety measures right now. And just to go over what a couple of those are, this amendment would require a light rail operator to give blind pedestrians the right of way. This amendment would give light rail operators, it would force them to give school children the right of way. I think we should care about the safety of these things. It would also require them to stop at collisions and report information about collisions. You know, if we need to do some cleanup on this later, let's accept the amendment, include these additional safety measures, and clean it up. But if we're talking about cleaning this up later, let's include the additional safety measures.
The member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Youakim, it's important that we need the true answers on who has authority to stop the trains. On the federal, or on the heavy rail, that's covered under federal law. Local law enforcement does not have the right to stop those trains. It takes a federal railroad to do that. So we need to know who has the authority to stop the trains. You never really said that. It doesn't say that in your bill. So I'm just wondering how who's going to stop those trains? Do they have to wait to the next stop? If they involved in an accident, that's too late. We need to get this done. We need to get these people stopped. If they're driving recklessly, we need to get that stopped before there's another accident and before somebody else is killed.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to simplify this. There's a difference between the underlying bill, which defines the problem and the solution very narrowly, and my amendment, which defines the problem and the solution very comprehensively. So one is narrow, one is broad. I think one leaves some work to do, and one gets the job done today, and I urge your support and your green vote on the amendment.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Runbeck yield to a quick question?
She will. Representative Mariani.
Representative Runbeck, one of the provisions that you're adding in this mini omnibus light rail transit amendment is 169.41, crossing of fire hose. This legislation goes back to 1937. So in light of everything that you just shared here right now, what is the purpose being met with including 169.41 in your amendment?
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Mariani. I grant you that does seem like a bit of an anomaly and a bit of an outlier. Of that entire list, it is the only one that seems like it doesn't quite, it's not quite current and not quite something we're too concerned about these days. But there may be somebody who has more information. At this point, I do not.
Representative Mariani.
Well, Madam Speaker, perhaps there is someone who has more information. That's why we introduce bills that have this kind of scope of inclusion into it so we can have that conversation in committee and on the floor of the House here. Obviously, you have a right to do that. The author of the amendment has admitted that this thing this particular provision seems particularly skewed given all the arguments that they just made about careless driving. Members, you have a bill before you that addresses a loophole in the law around careless driving that springs from an incredibly tragic incident. Representative Youakim is responding precisely and almost surgically to that particular provision. And instead, we're going to play games with it here by adding all sorts of other requirements, which may be good ones, I don't know, crossing fire hoses. This is not what we should be doing here. Representative Runbeck, if you really wanted to have a full conversation about this, then you should have brought this kind of bill either to Representative Hornstein's committee or perhaps to my committee. We would have certainly had that conversation. We had the conversation on the provision before us. So members, we can take one another's bills here and turn them into little omnibus bills dealing with every topic in that area, or we can address precisely something that's focused, that meets a good public policy purpose, and as I mentioned in this case, strives from a very real tragedy that affected the lives of a good Minnesota family. And so members, let's get past this, let's vote down this amendment, and then let's vote up this bill.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I may be the only member of the chamber who's trained both State Patrol troopers and Metro Transit Police. I've trained both of them, and I want to paint a picture for you. The State Patrol troopers, Camp Ripley, what they do is they, as they're training, they look at the traffic laws and they actually paraphrase and put on poster board all around their classrooms so they can memorize and understand the traffic laws. And the problem with this is that you've identified all these areas that are going to apply to light rail transit, but then it says, except for those provisions which by their nature cannot reasonably apply to light rail transit vehicles. How are they supposed to interpret that? So they're now going to be figuring out not only which of these provisions apply, then they have to figure out which would reasonably apply and which wouldn't. You're putting a real challenge in the hands of our law enforcement officers. I don't understand why you would possibly do that. We have a surgical strike bill here that takes the reckless and careless driving laws and applies them to all kinds of vehicles, includes light rail transit. And instead, you're going to slap on, and I really would say, this messy effect of grabbing a whole bunch of other traffic laws. Listen, don't make the police officers and the state patrol troopers do our work. If we think that some of these provisions should apply to light rail transit vehicles, do the work of going through step by step and saying apply these and don't apply those. But don't include a whole bunch of provisions and then slap in those which cannot reasonably apply to light rail transit. That's not fair to our law enforcement, and I don't think we should do that. Vote it down. Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Madam Chair, members, I can explain real easy how a fire hose can be classified in this bill. I was on a fire department. When there's a fire and we have to bring a hose across the railroad tracks, the lines are shut down. And if a train goes over those hoses after the line's been shut down, the engineer can actually lose his license. In Minnesota law with our light rail, we don't have that option. It's important to have that because if there's a fire and they have to shut the line down and an operator's continuously driving on that line after it's been shut down, he should get charged.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering if the author of the amendment would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Runbeck, I heard you say that the provision relating to fire hoses might be the only one that might not fit here. I'm just looking at I was looking at some of the other provisions in there. I noticed there's 169.06 mentioned that deals with signs, signals, and markings. It includes a whole bunch of requirements on the commissioner, which I assume is the Commissioner of Transportation, requiring them to adopt a manual and specifications for a uniform system of traffic control devices, to place those traffic control devices and maintain them on the trunk highway. It allows local authorities to place signage. I'm just wondering if the author of the amendment could explain to me how that provision would apply to a light rail transit operator.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Freiberg. Look, all of these provisions, all of these sections apply to every other driver, right? Buses, cars, trucks, okay? We're just saying they're going to now apply to the light rail train operator. So I think that's, you know, signage. I think there's obviously a need to pay attention to the signs and the rules regarding the signs. So I think these make a great deal of sense, and we just heard why the fire hose makes a good deal of sense. So I just urge folks to vote green, and let's, I don't want to play games with this bill either, I'll tell you that, but I think that it seems odd that we don't want to get the comprehensive job done at this point.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Runbeck. The provisions I mentioned don't actually apply to drivers. They apply to, as I mentioned, the Commissioner of Transportation. Clearly, it seems like this amendment needs work. I think there should be a bill introduced. I think we should vote down this amendment and adopt the narrow provision that Representative Youakim has, where she has identified an issue and a surgical way to correct it. I think we should vote down this amendment and vote in favor of the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was just going to touch on the fire hose as well.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, under Rule 2.32, a member who is not making the motion or the subject in question before the body may not speak more than twice.
I find the point of order well taken until every other member wishing to speak on the topic has spoken. A member who has not spoken on the topic. The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Johnson yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Considine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Johnson, you are a licensed peace officer, correct?
Representative Johnson.
I'm a formerly licensed police officer. I have retired.
Oh, congratulations on that.
Representative Considine.
Would he yield for another question?
He will yield. Representative Considine.
Does not the State Patrol, the Sheriff's Department, the local police department, and the Metro Police Department all have the authority to enforce traffic regulations?
Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, yes, they do.
Representative Considine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, then that would be the answer to your question earlier. All of them can enforce that.
think this is her second time. Representative Youakim.
Members, thank you for the discussion. I would really like this very simple bill to be passed today so that the family can have some closure. I hate to see us play political games with this and do work on the floor that we could be doing in committee. Thank you.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can assure you, I'm not playing games. Representative Pinto, I can assure you this is not a mess, and there's no slapping going on here. Madam Speaker and members, there are very serious additional items that should be included. Representative New was very articulate in explaining those. We should put the safety of our school children, or I should say we should think about them and include them in this amendment. We should consider the blind. And in regards to the fire hose, for members who are in rural districts like mine, a fire hydrant may not be there. And fire departments responding to fires out in our area, the water is obviously in the truck. And so you could imagine a scenario with a car fire or any other scenario involving a fire where a fire hose may have to go across the light rail track. It's not inconceivable, and we wouldn't want the light rail driver to simply ignore the fire hose and go over it. That would create an additional, obviously serious problem and potentially increase a situation into a greater life-threatening situation. Why would you not want to include that? It's beyond me. Looking at this list of additional provisions, I think it was Representative Freiberg who referenced signs, signals, and markings. Why would you not want the light rail transit operator to ensure to be following markings? You absolutely would want that. So it is the right thing to do, Madam Speaker and members, to vote green on this amendment to include these additional provisions so that we can ensure that light rail transit operators are operating under the same rules that the rest are to help make our roads, and in this case, areas where people would be operating near a light rail track, safer. Please vote green. Thank you.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to mention to the body that I did have a bill. It is a bill, House File 457, and I did request a hearing of the Transportation Committee.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 55 ayes and 72 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moves to amend Senate File number 1339 as follows, and the amendment is coded A3.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The amendment labeled A3 basically says that operators of light rail vehicles are not to be driving with any alcohol in their system. Currently, there is not a, again, because we haven't included them in our chapter regarding traffic statutes, there isn't any alcohol level that is determined or that is specified as far as the regulation. And the 0-0 regulation is something that, for example, BNSF has in their policy that their drivers are not to have any alcohol in their system. I think it's you know, a good idea that we require a sober operator. We're talking about the safety of the public, the safety of the pedestrian community, and that is essentially what the amendment does. And I would ask for a roll call vote.
Representative Runbeck requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to point of order under 3.21A. Motions and propositions must be germane. I am prepared to offer advice.
State your advice.
Madam Speaker, Rule 3.21A does require that amendments not make a substantial change to the scope or purpose of a bill. That's measured often based on the title of the bill and also the chapter that it's amending. The title here is simply subjecting LRT operators to reckless or careless driving law, and it's amending a section of Chapter 169. The amendment makes changes to a number of other sections, including Chapter 171, which is a completely different section, and makes changes to DWI provisions, and I'll note that they're not even parallel to the provisions for motor vehicles. It's a completely different set and a different level, et cetera. Madam Speaker, that is a substantial change to the scope or purpose of the bill, and I'd ask that you find the point of order well taken. Thank you.
Advice. Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, speaking for advice on this amendment. The Amendment A3, I believe it is germane. Chapters 160 to 174 are the transportation statutes. This amendment does add light rail operators to Chapter 169. Currently, they're not in 169, so they can, as far as the way the law reads, they can be intoxicated and still drive the train without any issues. So I believe it's important, and I do believe the underlying bill is in Chapter 169. DWI laws until a couple of years ago were in 169 until this body moved them. And I believe that because it is in transportation issues, that this is germane.
Having heard the advice of Representative Pinto and Representative Johnson, and having reviewed the amendment and the bill, I find the point of order is well taken.
Madam Speaker, I appeal the ruling of the Speaker and request a roll call.
Representative Doubt appeals the ruling of the Speaker and requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I appreciate your ruling, Madam Speaker. You were not in the chair last week when we changed the strike zone on this issue, so the members obviously know very clearly that now this is absolutely allowed. This one actually is way within the new strike zone. So I'll just encourage members to be consistent with the way they voted last week. Let's go ahead and just allow this one to be offered, and we'll vote it up or down just like Minnesotans sitting at home watching would expect us to do. They just expect us to make the decisions, and sometimes they're tough decisions, but I know that they understand that sometimes we have to make tough decisions, and we don't use a procedural mute button or anything to try to figure our way out of making those decisions. So we all know how we voted last week on this same issue. I've promised everyone on my side I wouldn't get angry about this, so I'm going to be very calm. But let's just be consistent with the way we were last week. This is absolutely allowed now under the new strike zone. So we'll make sure that we overrule the Speaker. We'll just vote on the amendment like people at home would expect us to, and we'll move on with the business of the state of Minnesota. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members.
The member from Scott, Representative Albright.
Madam Speaker, advice.
Advice to the body, Representative Albright.
Madam Speaker and members, if you take a look at the amendment and you compare it to the underlying bill, let me draw your attention to a couple of lines in the underlying bill that I think to Minority Leader's doubt, it just confirms that this is well within the strike zone. On 1.8, it says consciously disregarding a substantial and unjustifiable risk. And on line 10, it says the risk must be of such a nature and degree that disregard of it constitutes a significant deviation from the standard of conduct that a reasonable person would observe in the situation. Members, I don't know how close you can get to the bill with this amendment. If you think that driving an LRT under the influence is not within the purview of this bill, I don't know where you find justification. These are folks that are just as important to be under obligation to drive soberly like a truck driver, like a railroad operator on BNSF, and yet we are asking or allowing them not to be obligated to adhere to the same standards. And I almost wonder what you're thinking on the other side of the aisle. This is a good amendment. It strengthens the case. It observes the intent of the underlying bill, and I think it enforces the content for the safety of all that ride LRT or that pass in front of it, even more importantly. So, Madam Speaker, I would hope that you would think on this, and members, I would hope that you would think otherwise on this. We had the Hansen amendment last week, and as you recall, we had a vigorous conversation late last week on another amendment to the amendment, or excuse me, the amendment on a bill was reached in germaneness. Come on, this is right in the wheelhouse. Thank you.
Advice to the body, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, members, I actually misspoke before, and my apologies. None of the sections in this amendment come from the same chapter as the bill, as the underlying bill. So the underlying chapter is Chapter 169. These sections in the amendment are Chapters 169A and 171, totally different chapters. It is true that those various chapters have to do with transportation, and that is a much bigger and broader topic area than I've experienced even in the several years which I was in the minority. Members, this makes a substantial change to the title of the bill. It's a completely different series of sections, and regardless of the merits of the amendment, the question is it germane? And under the approach that's been taken through the years, this is very much not germane. And so I would urge that the members vote to uphold the ruling of the Speaker.
The question before the body is, shall the decision of the Speaker stand as the judgment of the House? A yes or a green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker. A no or a red vote goes against the ruling of the Speaker. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Garofalo votes no. There being 75 ayes and 56 noes, the appeal of the ruling of the Speaker does not prevail. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 1339.
Third reading. Discussion. Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members for the lively discussion. This bill would simply make the reckless and careless driving statutes apply to light rail operators as it does to their colleagues that drive transit buses. It closes a gap in the current law. Nick's family and friends have worked tirelessly since this accident to bring attention to the need for increased safety around the light rail system. This bill is only the first step in that process. It will not prevent every accident, but hopefully by passing this bill today, we can take this first step towards having some good come out of this senseless tragedy. And I ask you for a green vote on this bill.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And we heard keep it clean. Well, clean should not mean deficient. And we as a body, we all know the tragedy. We as a body should never do the bare minimum to show we did something. Frankly, I more than once have heard about operators of a lawnmower being pulled over and arrested for driving under the influence. And frankly, I see a large train as being much more dangerous, capable of much more damage than a lawnmower. Yet we have neglected to do common sense things on this bill. Who would have thought that if we were going to actually take care of the loophole, that if you're operating a light rail train, that you don't have to follow the basic things we expect anyone that's operating a vehicle or conveyance to do. And if you asked anyone on the street, any of our constituents, what are the 5 things? Don't you think driving under the influence would be one of them? Don't you think yielding to children, the blind, etc., would be on that list? Instead, I heard people saying political games. Frankly, I'm insulted to think asking for the same consideration for someone operating, again, a train, follow the common sense regulations that we have for other operators and other vehicles. I am saddened that we have third reading and a vote on something that's the bare minimum. I have a different standard for what the bare minimum is, so I would call this in its current form deficient. And saying, oh, we could take care of it next week, etc. Well, if I honestly thought that was going to happen, I would have thought that a more comprehensive bill would have gotten a hearing. But again, this is the bill that's before us, and we have the choice. We tried to amend it, tried to make it actually contain some of the common things we should require of somebody operating a vehicle on our streets. Because if you've walked just a little ways away from here and you cross the street, walk up, those streets have light rail running through them. So I just wish we had a better bill to pass than something that is probably about the bare minimum we could do for our citizens and the people that use our streets. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, as I'm sitting here listening to this debate, I'm not on the transportation committees, but I'm really curious as to why these amendments weren't okay with both sides of the aisle. And my concern, folks, is this is not a political game. This is people's lives we're dealing with. And I know that I've heard of transit wrecks and so forth, people being struck by various forms of transit in other states, and they find later that the driver was under the influence of alcohol. And I don't want to wait, members, until that happens here, and then we have another family who has lost a loved one because we didn't do our work here. And so that really troubles me about this whole debate, that we aren't thinking, that we don't have the forethought to think ahead that another family could be in the same predicament that these folks are in and mourning the loss of a loved one because we didn't do our work because their family member was struck by a train that was driven by someone who was under the influence or was not obeying some other traffic ordinance that other drivers have to obey. So that's really disappointing for me to see that happen in this body, and I hope that we do better going forward. Thank you, members.
The member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Chair, members, using this tragic incident, it's the only fortunate thing that we found out from it was the fact that Chapter 169 does not apply to transit operators. Chapter 169A does not apply. So instead of doing what we should do and fix the real problem, because we're going to have another situation come up where another area of our statute doesn't apply, we're just taking one thing. We had an opportunity to fix this and put impaired driving in there. Follow Burlington Northern's rules of zero tolerance. We didn't do that. So now once we pass this, and I'm going to vote green for this, but once we pass this and the governor signs it, if the light rail operator is intoxicated the only thing we can charge them with is careless or reckless driving, because they don't fall under our transit driving laws or our DWI laws. They might have stuff in policy, but they're not listed in the 169A chapter. So disappointed that we didn't fix the whole thing when we're just doing a little part. But I want to thank Representative Youakim for at least getting this part fixed. But let's take a good look at everything and make sure we do it right.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Youakim, for bringing us an important bill. I would be, frankly, shocked if there was nothing but green up on the board here when we cast a vote. Members, this really kind of falls under the category of no good deed left unpunished. Representative Youakim is responding to a loophole in the law that allows that created the inability for someone driving an LRT who ran a light and caused the tragic outcome. She's addressing that directly and head on. But instead, here tonight, instead of talking about that, we're talking about fire hoses, and we're spreading incredible misinformation about these drivers of these vehicles relative to driving under the influence. Members, Representative Youakim hopefully will get a third chance here or a second chance to do a closing. I hope she does, and I hope that in her closing she makes it real clear what Minnesota law is relative to that. My understanding, members, is in the state of Minnesota that drivers of these vehicles are in fact covered under our laws. You wouldn't know that by half the debate here today as we focused on fire hoses, as we focused on putting down someone who's trying to do a good thing, but that is the fact. I was going to ask Representative Youakim to yield, but rather I'm just going to sit down, Madam Speaker, and hopefully you'll call on her so she can make her closing argument and clarify for all of us this issue of DWI and LRT drivers.
Any other discussion other than the author of the bill? The member from Anoka, Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. You know, our public responsibility here is for the safety of our citizens, and I think we're leaving a bill that has loose ends, that leaves a lot of open questions that we could have answered. And so I just want to echo what my colleagues have said, that for some reason, I don't know who we're trying to protect, actually, by not fulfilling our obligation to write a complete and comprehensive law, but we have taken a first step. I do thank the Westlake family, and I wanted to thank Mr. Nils Peterson. He's been a driving force of this as well. He's the dance instructor of Nicholas Westlake, and he's been very helpful as well. So thanks to everyone who's brought it this far.
Any further discussion? Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to clear some things up. Yes, the DWI law currently applies to LRT drivers just like it does to the transit drivers on buses. I do not know why this misinformation was put out there. We could walk through the statutes if you want. It does apply. In fact, not only does it apply at the state level, it applies at the federal level. And this driver was tested. He was found to be negative, just for more information. The loophole that we're talking about is only in 169.13 because in the language they're explicitly excluded because of the definition of vehicle. That's the loophole. And then the provisions that were mentioned in the A2 amendment that broadened everything were not included in Representative Runbeck's original bill and were not part of amendments in any of our committees. So with that, members, this, like I said before, is the first step of us to look at how we make sure that everyone on our roads are safe. I would like us to pass this overwhelmingly, like the other body did unanimously, to show that we do care about safety on our roads and at our LRT crossings. So thank you, members, for the green vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members, without objection, we will advance to announcements for the purpose of an announcement. The member from Hennepin, Representative Adelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, and I thank you for this time. I just would like to acknowledge our state champions for Edina have joined us. If you could stand in the bleachers up there. We have the Edina State Boys and Dive Team, the Edina Boys Hockey AA Team, the Edina Girls AA Hockey Team, and unfortunately the Boys Alpine Ski Team could not join us, but if the members wouldn't mind joining in a round of applause for our state champs.
Without objection, we will revert to the calendar for the day. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 637.
House File number 637, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health, the second engrossment.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Morrison, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 637 is a bill introduced on behalf of all health-related licensing boards, such as boards of medical practice, nursing, and dentistry. Revisions are made in Chapter 214, which applies to all health-related licensing boards and includes provisions that are common to all the boards. The bill addresses authority for criminal background checks and temporary suspensions. Revisions related to criminal background checks in the bill are for the purpose of reducing duplication and decreasing costs for the applicants, for licensure, and for clarifying the content and use of the data in the criminal history report. Specifically, the bill eliminates duplication for an applicant in 3 ways. It specifies that an applicant's criminal background check results are valid for 1 year from the date the results were received by the board, and provides an exemption for repeating a criminal background check for an application with the same board within the same year. This reduces duplication when an individual is applying for more than one type of license within the same board. Secondly, it removes a 90-day time frame for an applicant to submit fingerprints for a background check. Currently, if the applicant misses the 90-day window, they have to pay the fee again. And third, a health-related licensing board can require an alternative method of criminal history check for an applicant who has submitted at least 2 sets of fingerprints that are unreadable by the BCA or the FBI. This happens frequently in health-related fields because of all the hand washing. Currently, 3 sets are required, and the applicant has to pay the BCA and the FBI fees for the 3rd set. The national standard actually is 2 sets of rejected fingerprints. This reduces duplication and cost for the applicant. House File 637 also facilitates the Board of Medical Practice to participate fully in the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact and be recognized as the primary state of residence. The legislature passed the Interstate Medical License Compact in 2015, but the board has not been able to participate fully. The bill provides clear authority for a board to request a criminal background check from a current licensee for the purpose of participating in the compact. Lastly, House File 637 modifies time requirements for a board final order on a temporary suspension after a contested hearing. When an administrative law judge's report and recommendations are for no action, the health-related licensing board will issue a final report within 30 days of receiving the report and recommendations. When the judge's report and recommendations are for action, the board will issue a final report within 60 days of receipt of the report and recommendation. The changes that House File 637 brings to Chapter 214 benefits applicants, licensees, and the boards. I ask for your green vote. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 637.
Third reading. Discussion. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the bill author would yield.
She will yield. Representative Lucero.
The question is, and I'm just quickly trying to find anywhere in the bill if this is indeed a compact. I'm seeing a description that this is a compact, interstate compact. And what I'm wondering is, with an interstate compact, what, if any, hurdles might there be if in the future we decide to change as a state to exit the compact? And the reason I'm asking the question is, last year I was just conferring with Chair Lesch. Last year we heard a bill that was a compact that had concerns because there were significant hurdles for us to leave. So if we chose to leave, is it easy, hard? What might the requirements be for us to leave if there are requirements? Thank you.
Representative Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Lucero, the compact we're already members of. We passed that in 2015. This clarifies language. I'm not sure I know the answer to your question. I'd need to have the advice of an attorney.
Representative Lucero.
No, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think she just answered the question. If we're already in this, then this is clarifying it's not putting us into a new compact. So thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1883. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 1883, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to education.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, on an average day in Minnesota, there are approximately 10,000 children in the out-of-placement homes in the foster care system. Pursuant to federal law, if they are placed in a new foster home outside of their current school or school district, they are able to continue attending the school of origin if it is in their best interest. If remaining in this school of origin is determined not to be in their best interest, a student needs to be enrolled in a new school immediately. HF 1883 does two things. It adds clarifying language into statute that students must be enrolled in a new school within 7 school days, not immediately, and requires that this piece of information be included into an existing report that the data on the frequency of delayed enrollment is accessible. I do have an author's amendment that is a small change in language in Section 1 after ongoing consultation with MDE and DHS. We know all too well that the long-term effects of trauma and disruption can have on children. This bill seeks to minimize the length of time that students are spending away from school at a time when their home life is anything but certain. I'd like to thank my co-authors in the House and the Senate for their support on this bipartisan bill. Coming together to improve the lives of our brave and resilient, but also most vulnerable children is one of the most important things that we can do here. Thank you for your support.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kotyza-Witthuhn moves to amend House File Number 1883 as follows, and the amendment is coded A3.
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I referenced just briefly, this is a language amendment based upon ongoing consultation with MDE and DHS after the committee process.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1883, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion. The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And would the bill's author yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative, I have a couple of questions about the best interest of the student, and who determines what's in their best interest in situations like this with foster care?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative, those are a valid question. I just want to make sure that I'm addressing what you're looking for. I think in the process when children are being moved from one placement to another, it's in consultation with their caseworker, social worker, potential biological parents can be involved in that discussion. It just really depends on the situation.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so does the child have any say in that process?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
As I understand it, if the child, thank you, Madam Speaker. As I understand it, if the child is old enough to participate in that conversation, then yes, their opinion would be considered.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the author would continue to yield.
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Speaker. And to the bill's author, what age would that be that they would be eligible to actually have an input in which school they attend?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Scott, I believe it's somewhere around the age of 9 or 11. I don't know if it depends on the specific situation either, that they take into consideration the maturity of the child.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the author would continue to yield?
She will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so I'm trying to just ingest this new language or digest this new language. And you're taking into consideration the best interest of the student. And do you take into consideration what is going to set them up best for academic success, whether that would be staying in their current school or switching another one, if it happens to be, for instance, a really long commute to a new school?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Scott, as I understand it, this is what your question might be regarding the federal law. And so if it is in the child's best interest to stay in their school, they are able to do so. So that's a federal law. And all we're doing is kind of incorporating that. And if it is found to not be in the student's best interest, then we would want to make sure that they are enrolled in the new school in the shortest amount of time possible.
Representative Scott. Further discussion to the bill. The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author yield?
She will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, we were hearing about this, but I don't really understand where would this happen? Who's going to make the decision?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, I'm not totally certain that I understand your question.
Representative Drazkowski.
If she continue, yield, Madam.
She will. Representative Drazkowski.
So the question, Madam Speaker, and Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn is this: will the parents decide this? What is the location of the decision? Will it happen in the home? Will it happen in the school? Will it happen in the court? Will it happen in a social service agency? Who's going to be making this decision?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My best guess, Representative Drazkowski, would be that it might be assigned in the courtroom in consultation with the social workers and biological parents and anyone else who's involved in the case of the child.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would she continue to yield?
She will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, so we think that it'll happen in the courts, but we don't know. That seems to be the best guess. Representative, we are forming out the laws of the state of Minnesota here. We need to know the consequences of this bill if it passes. How are parents going to know if they have foster kids how this decision is going to be made? Is there an application they fill out? Do they petition the court? Do they need to hire a lawyer in order to determine if in their judgment the school is not the best school for them? How do they get access to it?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, I'm not sure if you're aware that I do have children who are in the foster care system. They're previous to school age, but we do have monthly visits with their caseworkers. That's something that's very typical. It's required in the system. So these sorts of things are happening on an ongoing basis. The families are involved, the biological parents are involved if that is in the best interest of the child. Children have public defenders. They have social workers who are always looking out for their best interest. They have guardians ad litem. I believe some of my colleagues here in the room are guardians ad litem and might be able to extrapolate a little bit more if you'd care to hear from them.
Representative Drazkowski.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative, that's not good enough. We don't know. There's thousands of Minnesotans who have foster kids, and that's what we're looking out for here. How can they determine which school they're going to go into? We're putting language in the bill, in the new amendment now, that's eventually proposed to go into law that Minnesota families are not going to know how they access this. Members, this bill is not complete, it's not ready, it hasn't been vetted, and it will only cause disruption and misunderstanding among the people of Minnesota about how they're going to make this decision. We're actually writing something in law that is telling parents, somehow, or telling people that after 7 days, they can determine some other place to go with their kids, but they don't know where. Members, this isn't ready for prime time. It needs to be sent back to the wood shop. I'd encourage a no vote on the bill.
The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, we did vet this in education policy and finance. I'm a co-author, and of course I'd make sure that bills are vetted before they come to this floor when it's an education issue. But that aside, Madam Chair, would the author yield, please?
She will yield. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative, one question I didn't ask you in committee was what definitions of school are involved for the child if the child stays, or if it's in the interest, I think usually of the courts, that the child be placed differently. What definition of schools would be involved?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Erickson. I did have a couple conversations with Representative Keel based upon if the child is previously being homeschooled, if they're in a charter school, if they're enrolled in public school or private school. We did change the language. It had been set up as school district, outside of their school district, and we changed it to prior school so that it covers a wide range of schooling options.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative, because the definition of school, of course, in statute is either a traditional public charter or homeschool, so it's good to know that that was a consideration as we put together this file. Members, this is a good bill, I think, to support for the sake of our foster children so that they are placed correctly, but the questions that have been asked of the representative have been good ones as well. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I was just going to say I have served on these committees which help decide where a child should go to school, when they should go to school. And the answer to the representative's question earlier is it really depends. It depends on the situation that the child is coming out of and the situation in which the child is in. It can be the guardian and the social worker meeting with the family that makes the decision. It can be a whole host of people. I've been in rooms where there are as many as 15 people involved in the foster care system who've been making the best decisions for the children. But I thank the representative who spoke just prior to me, because it is a good bill, and it's important that children have consistency in their school when possible and to be enrolled in school as quickly as possible. So I agree with my member across the aisle that I encourage a green vote on this bill. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Adelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. I am a guardian ad litem with Hennepin County, so serving Representative Drazkowski, thousands of children in our child protection system who are in need of laws like this. So for it to not be ready for prime time, I believe it is. So often laws that are created here are not about kids. I think that this law is. within 7 days to be enrolled in a school, and so often Representative Cleaborn, making sure that that school is actually not going to cause disruption is so important. So I encourage a green vote.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 125 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1960. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 1960, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to commerce.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Richardson, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 1960 is a Department of Commerce housekeeping bill. The bill makes a number of technical changes, including fixing a number of incorrect cross-references, and it also makes statutory license requirements uniform in areas related to enforcement, administrative services, and financial institutions as well. Regarding enforcement, it cleans up some debt settlement language to bring reporting requirements in alignment with other licenses at the department. It also aligns Chapter 332A with similar reporting requirements. Clarifying cross-reference has also been added to ensure that debt collection agencies are aware of limitations of actions based on consumer debt. In the Administrative Services Division, it actually amends the statute and requires Petro Fund contractor registration to take place every 2 years instead of annually, which will mean less paperwork for the contractors and agency staff. Regarding financial institutions, the department is seeking to bring the information or the statute in line with the federal Dodd-Frank Act and would allow originators to obtain temporary loan origination authority if they change institutions or move interstate while they await their new license. It also clarifies information regarding the Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 1960.
Third reading, discussion. The member from Scott, Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author of the bill yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Richardson, you just made a reference to the Safe Seniors Financial Protection Act. And in looking at the bill, you talk about SEC registered investment advisors. Does that include broker-dealers or just their agents?
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My understanding is that it just includes the agents. That's my understanding.
Representative Albright.
Madam Speaker, if she would continue to yield.
She will yield. Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Richardson, you mentioned SEC registered investment advisors. Does that also include those that are covered by the SI? I'm trying to remember the synonym for it. You know, Madam Speaker, I think my answer has been given, so I'll retract that. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2154. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2154, number 5 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to lawful gambling.
I recognize the member from Clay, Representative Lien, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 2154 is the Gambling Control Board's agency bill. The board has not had an agency bill since 2016, and this bill brings more accountability of charitable gaming, bookkeeping, and operations as a result of theft and embezzlement that occurred late last year. Though these illegal activities were not widespread, this bill is needed to provide more assurances for legal charitable gaming in the future. Section 1 modifies the time requirement for a person to be an active member of a charitable organization from 6 months to 90 days. This change brings the time requirement into conformity similar to the existing law affecting licensed gambling managers. Section 2 clarifies that bingo gift certificates, which are bingo gift cards used to purchase bingo packets and games, can only be sold at face value. This change is a result, as I mentioned, of a recent theft discovered by the board at a local bingo hall where a seller was discounting the value of the gift certificates. Section 3 of the bill this change corrects an oversight by adding electronic linked bingo games to the list of charitable gambling games that a lessor and their immediate family members are prohibited from playing. Section 4 clarifies that an organization must keep a bingo gift card log to properly account for the sale and redemption of bingo gift cards. Again, this change is a result of some of those recent thefts and embezzlements discovered by the board at a local bingo hall. Bingo gift card logs will also become part of the accounting records. And Section 5 of the bill modifies the time requirement that cash deposits need to be made at the end of the month. Deposits must be made within 4 business days for electronic gaming within 4 business days of the first of the month for electronic games, and this allows flexibility for charities to get money to the bank. Members, I ask for a yes vote on this bill, and I stand for questions.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 2154.
Third reading. Discussion. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and if the bill author would yield.
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Lien, as I'm looking at Section 4, so it's line 2.29, 2.30, the organization must keep a bingo gift certificate log. And I'm reading this section, and it might be in another portion of the existing law, but is there a time requirement, because I'm not seeing it in this section, by which that log must be kept, a maximum time?
Representative Lien.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Lucero. Current law mandates that books be kept for issues of sales and prize winnings, but not a specific separate log for bingo gift cards. So again, because of some theft and embezzlements, some employees of charitable gaming were selling the gift cards at a lower cost than what they actually are, pocketing the difference of the money. This is going to mandate that all of those transactions are recorded on paper, specifically for the bingo gift cards, in addition to the record keeping they have to keep for other prizes and winnings.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm not necessarily opposed to that. That is a good idea, potentially, but my question is there a time limit? But for example, could the organization that's holding these records, that's mandated to keep these not at a gross sales level, or a gross expenses level, as I'm seeing, or gross profit, which is aggregated. This is very granular down to each bingo gift certificate number face value, right? That's getting very granular. And so does this log have to be kept if 25 years has gone by? I mean, how long is there a maximum time period?
He will yield. Representative Lien.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Lucero, I do not see in current state statute that there is a specific time length for how long these have to be kept. I would assume that if the Gambling Control Board has some questions about these things, they would be able to ask for those records from the specific charities, from the specific organizations, but current state statute is not specific as to exactly how long these records need to be kept.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But that's a problem. And again, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I'm not asking any gotcha question. It's not my motivation here. I'm just concerned that when we have a requirement that retention of certain logs is to be kept, that we have a reasonable period of time by which they could be purged. We had a similar conversation on a House File 8 and 9, or I guess it would be technically House File 8 or 9 for retention period 8. In that there was no retention, or there was no requirement for how long they have to be kept, so it would be forever. And then the bill author put at least 20 years, which is still too long. But there's at least a recognition that you can't keep records forever. And so I guess if the bill author would yield for another question, Madam Speaker.
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
So what's the path for this? Has this already been passed by the Senate? Is this going to go to the Senate, or what's going on here? Would there be an opportunity to potentially consider something like this?
Representative Lien.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As far as I know, the bill is included in the Senate State Government Finance Bill. The bill, I was trying to think who's carrying the bill in the Senate, but the bill is included in the Senate State Government Finance Bill. This is the bill in front of us. I certainly welcome you to reach out to Tom Barrett, who runs the Gambling Control Board for the state, to talk about some of those things, to address some of those things. I'm certain we could put parameters around that. I'd certainly be open to those questions for you if you want to address that. And like I say, this bill is heading into conference committee on the Senate side at least. So I would imagine we could talk with our counterparts in the Senate, speak with the chair over here about some amendments on that, in addition to talking with Tom Barrett, just exactly how that would work out.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Okay, so it's going to conference committee. So perhaps you might be willing to consider this or talk with the agency and I just want to punctuate this point, and that is looking at current law in Section 4. Again, it's talking about gross sales, gross receipts, everything at a very high level aggregated amount. So it's easier to maintain records at that level than it is to maintain records all the way down to the level of certificate number, the face value, the date sold, the date redeemed. And we need to, as a state institution here, as the body, need to consider that it would be, after a point of time, the records would not need to be maintained for such a granular level. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lien.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the bill author yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
Representative, I realize this is not the tax bill, but are there any good things in this bill that help at least our local charities reduce expenses, do things in a more timely fashion? We've heard a lot that they feel are paying too much in taxes to the state. And again, I know this is not the tax bill, but do our local folks appreciate this? Does it help them at least cut some of their expenses? And are they in favor of this?
Representative Lien.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Anderson, this bill does not carry or contain any provisions that would help on the financial side for charitable gaming. I know they are going through some tough times right now. I am an author of a tax cut bill for the charitable gaming organizations. This bill does not contain any of those provisions. This is merely policy. There's no finance involved, and so again, it's just for more accountability in their record keeping and then some other technical provisions as well.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I want to thank you, Representative Anderson, because that was a question that I wanted to ask. Members, I know this is your bill. Representative Lien is just policy. Thank you for clarifying that. But as we go on with the session and the tax bill is put together, I do hope that we Think of the taxes that the charitable gaming members are paying. I work at a bar on the bar side and sell pull tabs from behind the counter, and many of the people who frequent this place are Lions members, and this is one of their top priorities. But thank you for bringing the bill forward, Representative Lien.
The member from Washington, Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Lane. Again, thank you. I know it's a policy bill, but I think you know I've been carrying, I think, 2 or 3 different bills dealing with the taxes and the expenses that our American Legions, our VFWs, the Lions Club, all the different organizations are involved in charitable gaming. We need to do something because they are in trouble. And I know this is just policy, but thank you for carrying the bill.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 622. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 622, number 6 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to commerce, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Wolgamott, to-year bill.
Madam Speaker, members, thank you for the opportunity to present House File 622, which would simplify advertising requirements for real estate licensees. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the bipartisan co-authors of this bill, starting with my neighbor from Stearns County, Representative Tim O'Driscoll, as well as Representatives Hewitt, Davids, Pearson, Garofalo, Detmer, Lucero, and Lilly. Madam Speaker, some brief background on this bill. In 2014, the requirement that a real estate licensee identify himself or herself as either a broker or an agent salesperson in the advertising was replaced with the requirement that any advertising by a licensee must include the real estate brokerage name more prominently displayed than the licensee's name. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, that language has continued to generate questions from some real estate licensees regarding what more prominently displayed means. In response to those questions, the Minnesota Realtors, of which I'm a proud member, worked with the Department of Commerce on the language before you today. To put it simply, House File 622 replaces the existing vague, more prominently displayed language with a simpler requirement that any advertising by a licensee must clearly and conspicuously display the real estate brokerage name. Madam Speaker, I'm not aware of any opposition to this bill, and members, on behalf of the Minnesota Realtors and on behalf of all Minnesotans looking to buy or sell a home, I urge your green vote on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 622.
Third reading, discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2225. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 2225, number 7 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to the Legislative Audit Commission and the Legislative Auditor.
The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 2225 is a product of the Legislative Audit Commission. It is changing and removing some of the directives that have been placed in statute relating to the Audit Commission. One of those is relating to requiring economic development audits for program evaluation. And so what this does is, instead of requiring that, we've gone through and actually audited most of the economic development grant programs. It changes to give consideration to. Under the obligation when there's where public data has been accessed, and then also relating to human services and some repealers. So this is a product of the Audit Commission, was drafted by the Legislative Auditor, and I ask for your support.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2225.
Third reading, discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1188. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 1188, number 8 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to transportation, the first engrossment.
The member from Scott, Representative Tabke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. House File 1188 is a bill to help expand and protect laborers and utility workers and garbage and recycling handlers all across the state of Minnesota. What it does is expands the definition of emergency vehicle to authorized vehicle. So what it does is creates an authorized vehicle, includes the vehicles as described as emergency vehicle, towing vehicle, freeway service vehicle, road maintenance vehicle, utility vehicle, construction vehicle, and solid waste vehicle and recycling vehicle. So it expands the definition of the of authorized vehicles, so people need to move over for those authorized vehicles. There are many jobs in the state of Minnesota and across the United States that have significant deaths happening every single day from people not getting over from utility workers, from line workers, and you've got a lot of, we're passing out some letters today that show the support that we have from across various industries, and I hope that you all can support House File 1188 to save lives and to have people move over from more vehicles. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 1188.
Third reading. Discussion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2181. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2181, number 9 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to economic development, the first engrossment.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Sandsted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 2181 is the bill which promotes telecommuting and rural broadband in Minnesota by creating a pathway for communities to secure telecommunicator forward status from the Department of Employment and Economic Development. To earn this certification, a community must promote telecommuting and designate a point of contact to coordinate opportunities. For example, they could coordinate activities of broadband providers, realtors, economic development professionals, employers, and employees. Additionally, this point of contact would work toward developing telecommuting capable broadband and be knowledgeable about broadband mapping. We know that in Greater Minnesota we have a fantastic quality of life. We appreciate our rural character and terrific natural resources. We also know for our communities to thrive, we need new strategies to diversify these economies to keep them strong. The ability for employers to offer telecommuting as an option can carry tremendous impact toward this goal. Instead of forcing Minnesotans to move where the jobs are, we can bring the jobs back home. This concept initially came to us from the state of Wisconsin, which was trying to find a way to promote local rural broadband with the idea that for rural communities, broadband and job growth can lead a great quality of life. They already have 13 communities certified in the program and more in the pipeline. With catalysts like this initiative, coupled with robust investments in high-speed broadband, I'm extremely confident that we can do well for our rural communities. Moreover, as we work to deliver fast, reliable broadband to all Minnesotans, telecommuter forward status can help communities which have good broadband access already market themselves to potential employers. The bill contains no appropriation and no mandates. It simply allows communities to seek this designation if they so choose. While a fiscal note for the bill hasn't been completed, DEED has stated they can implement the telecommuter forward certification program with no additional funding. Telecommunicator forward status will help position communities to grow, enhance their economies, and deal with future challenges. I appreciate your support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 2181.
Third reading. Discussion. The member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm looking at the bill. I'm kind of encouraged by the ability for it to encourage economic growth in our greater Minnesota areas. And I'm wondering if the author would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Representative Sandsteed. What committees had this bill traveled through?
Representative Sandsted.
Jobs.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Was it I'm looking at that it went through the Labor Committee and not Jobs. If you could clarify that.
She will yield. Representative Sandstead.
You are correct. I apologize. You are correct.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just kind of reading through the bill here today, why was it heard? Do you think that's the best committee that it was to be heard in and assigned to on labor and not Greater Minnesota Economic Development and Jobs?
Representative Sandstead.
I do, as we have not been dealing with policy in Greater Minnesota Jobs and Economic Development.
Representative Koznick.
So, Madam Speaker, I'm wondering, for the public to follow and us to follow as well, how do we determine what bills and subject matters go through different committees? And this one would seem that it would be, even though it is policy, to go through Greater Minnesota Jobs and Economic Development. And also, members, we're looking at an opportunity for local jurisdictions, local political subdivisions to be involved, and it's mentioned in the subdivision in here. I'm wondering if Representative Mason would stand for a question.
She will. Representative Koznick.
Representative Mason, you and I serve on the subcommittee on local government, and in the definition here, the political subdivision says cities, townships, or counties. Would that fall under the jurisdiction of local government subcommittee?
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative, that would certainly be something that we could consider if somebody wanted to hear that.
Representative Koznick.
Well, thank you. I wonder if my friend on the other side there, he's already standing, Representative Freiberg, might share with our members how we can determine which local government and cities and townships and bills that deal on this subject matter, how would we determine which committees they should go to? And do you think this bill here should have been properly sent to Labor, or if it should have went to one of the other committees under your jurisdiction of government operations, or maybe even Chair Mason's subcommittee on local government?
Are you asking him to yield?
Yes, Madam Speaker, if he would yield.
He will yield. Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Koznick. I think this bill was appropriately sent to the correct committee. It says right in the title of the bill that it is a bill for an act relating to economic development, creating a telecommuter forward certification, proposing coding for new law in Minnesota statutes, Chapter 116J. Chapter 116J is the chapter of the Minnesota statutes dealing with the Department of Employment and Economic Development. That is an issue that, in my mind, fits very well within the jurisdiction of the Labor Committee, and that is where this bill was heard.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg, and that was kind of the answer that I think I would have given myself as well, other than we have a committee of Greater Minnesota Jobs and Economic Development, as you stated there on line 1.2, relating to economic development. And this just goes to the point that our committee structure here has been quite difficult to follow. I won't ask the chair of the Greater Economic Jobs and Economic Development Committee to yield, but I think this is something that would probably fall under that jurisdiction, and I'm wondering if there's other policy provisions that may fall under one committee's jurisdiction, but certainly I'm thinking won't be actually heard in that committee. So this goes to the transparency in the process and the confusion of the committee process that was set up this year. And that is my point, Madam Speaker.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Zerwas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hansen, for bringing this forward. I fully support your bill. I'm very excited to vote for it. In fact, it was either this last year or the year prior, I attended an American Legislative Exchange Council meeting where representatives from Governor Walker's staff were presenting on this ALEC model policy bill. And I think it's wonderful work. I'm excited to see your bipartisan effort, and I'm excited to move this piece of legislation forward. Thank you very much for this great work.
The member from Roseau, Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the author of the bill would yield to just one question, please.
She will yield. Representative Fabian.
Representative Sandstead, in the original bill, there was some language regarding a process for public notice and comment on an application, and then also public comment made regarding the application. Can you explain to me and the body why you removed that language? And it would have been in subdivision 2 after the period where it says application. I'll give you a minute to find your notes if you want.
Representative Sandstead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe the difference, this language was modeled on language from Wisconsin. And they have a different oversight. They require a public hearing commentary option. We do not, going through deed. So that language is struck. That was the difference from the first version to what you have before you today.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Well, to the author of the bill and to the legislature, I want to compliment you on this bill because it does really complement something in my bill that Representative Robbins came up with, which is a grant fund for these towns under 5,000 to actually put hardwire into a work center for telecommuters in small towns. And I think that's a great idea. If we want to keep our small towns viable and growing, we want to have telecommuters to be able to live in smaller towns across the state. And this bill will complement them and give them the ability to highlight what they have done within their small town. That little piece in my bill is a little harder to explain than in 2 minutes, but I think we've talked about this bill more than enough.
The member from Itasca, Representative Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just rising in support of the bill. I'm a co-author of the bill, and I thank Representative Sandstead for authoring this. I think that rural communities should jump on this. I know my communities are very poised to take advantage of this program, and I think people want to have the opportunity to live where or to work where they want to live, and that's what we're all about in Minnesota. We're lakes and pines and beautiful places for people to work from home. And I think telecommuting is the advantage we have for the future, not just for cottage industries or people that are working out of their home, but for larger businesses. We've got Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delta Dental, others in northeastern Minnesota that are even having their employees work from home and telecommuting. So this is a great opportunity, but I would just like to mention to the body that we're talking about why wasn't the bill heard in Greater Minnesota Jobs, and I'm on Greater Minnesota Jobs, and I joined the committee and I was so eager to get to work because I thought we have so many topics we could be taking up in this new committee, and I was so disappointed, not in Chair Pulowski and not in my fellow members, but in our agenda. We really didn't have much to do. The only bills that we really passed out of the committee or looked at was flood and disaster control and broadband. And now here was a bill that we could have looked at. I think there's other bills we could have looked at. So I would just encourage leadership in the future that there's really more that Greater Minnesota could be talking about in the committee, and I hope that we can have a bigger agenda when we come back next session. Thank you.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Munson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is really an interesting bill. We're basically creating a new responsibility for state government to help communities advertise to bring businesses to their community. There's a letter on your desk from the executive director of the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development that really sums it up nicely. It says this is a small bill with no funding attached to it, therefore may not be very significant, but its real value is expressed by that exclamation point. I think she summed it up really well. This bill is kind of a do-nothing bill. You're allowing a community to advertise for itself to try to bring businesses there. We're trying to get legislators to race to get more broadband money for the community. I've worked from home for 10 years, and I live in a quote-unquote broadband desert. I have 25 meg download off of fixed wireless. I don't need broadband trenched into my house. And we also have 25 meg download in every single square foot of Minnesota from satellites. 25 meg download meets our definition of broadband everywhere in North America. I used to work for Hughes Aeronautics in Los Angeles. They own HughesNet. And they're also putting up hundreds of low orbiting satellites. We'll be able to have super high-speed internet anywhere on the planet in the next 5 to 10 years. And you're creating a whole workload for the state to try to authorize who has great broadband. This is not a good use for government. I live next to Medelia, Minnesota. They call themselves the pheasant capital of Minnesota. They could also call themselves the broadband capital of the world and try to get businesses there. The bottom line is businesses know what to look for when they're going to go somewhere. They actually might look into seeing, does this community actually have broadband? They're not going to pick up a businesses relocation are us trade magazine and say, gee, I'm going to look and see who has this designation from the state of Minnesota. That's one of the first questions they're going to ask. Do you guys have a backhaul or high-speed internet in the area? Or can we relocate there? This is really not the role of government. I don't know how much we keep on trying to grow government with broadband, but this is, I just had to stand up. This is so frustrating to see this. You're trying to create a division to help lobby legislators to get more broadband from the area. And disappointed. I'm going to vote no. Boy, it got quiet in here. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Wright, Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if the bill author would yield for a question.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I am looking at the language here, and on 1.19, I see coordination with broadband providers. On 2.1, I'm seeing collaboration with broadband providers. On 2.3, I'm seeing partnership with broadband providers. Being in the IT industry, I'm absolutely 100% in favor of increasing broadband across the state of Minnesota. In fact, one of the phrases that I often use is in the IT space, given work from home and other capabilities that broadband allows, it doesn't matter where we are, it just matters that we're there. And that's important. The question I would have for the bill author, Madam Speaker, is given the coordination, the collaboration, and the partnership with broadband providers, which indeed is important, it is my understanding that net neutrality language is working its way through multiple areas and other bills, and my understanding is including the Jobs Bill and the Jobs Committee. And so the question of the bill author would be, how would net neutrality have an impact on this effort in order to expand broadband across the state, and would it have a detrimental impact?
The author of the bill, Representative Sandsteed.
That's an excellent question, and I don't have an answer to that directly. What I can say is this bill is only giving a designation. It's a little gold star after the name of a community if they so choose.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Kotyza yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Kotyza, the same question. I didn't hear, I heard it was an excellent question, but I didn't hear much of an answer. Could you help elaborate? I think you sit on the Jobs Committee, or at least are a fellow representative who's interested in the broadband expansion and net neutrality, as I am. Do you have any insight on how net neutrality might have a negative impact on this effort?
Representative Kotyza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Lucero. So, first of all, the bill is a very good bill, and I think the designation is important. And to your question, I think that we have to be very careful about net neutrality. I think what we have here, Representative Sandsteed, is highlighting the importance of Greater Minnesota getting broadband efforts and the importance of attracting telecommuters. However, we do have net neutrality provisions working through the legislature that counteract that. And we have to make sure that those counterintuitive things do not get in place so that people, as identified in this bill, whether they're economic developers or whoever Representative Sandsteed allows to be designated as broadband experts for the area, don't have to deal with the questions of a very convoluted and horrible effects of net neutrality. So to the bill, Representative Sandsteed, nice work. Representative Lucero, to your question, let's not put net neutrality in place because it'll make this effort counterintuitive to what is trying to be accomplished in greater Minnesota and workforce attraction.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to that point, I wholeheartedly agree. And because there's no language in here on net neutrality, but as the bill author mentioned, it is an important question that we need to consider. And because net neutrality is working its way through the committees in other bills, we will see it here on the House floor. We need to keep this effort in scope when we are considering the broadband or the net neutrality impact that it would have on broadband expansion to all Minnesotans. And I look forward to that conversation as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to commend Representative Stanstead for this legislation. I think that we need to do whatever we can do to try to promote and encourage broadband in rural Minnesota. It's not quite so rosy. For years, my download speed was 2. And then we had a great upgrade last year when someone came up and climbed 60 feet into the air in a tree in my front yard and nailed a dish to my tree. I'm now up to 8. People thought my middle name was buffering. But I certainly do commend, again, Representative Sandstead and hope that more can be done for rural Minnesota in terms of broadband.
Any further discussion? The author of the bill, Representative Sandsteed.
I just want to thank members for this robust conversation. It's probably the educator in me, but there isn't a day that goes by when I don't learn something, and I'm appreciative of that. To my friends who might think that this is a go nowhere, do nothing bill, and that this isn't a good use of government, I just want to say, optional, free, and bipartisan effort. I would appreciate your support.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. All members who desire to vote. All members who desire to vote, having voted, the clerk will close the roll. There being 106 ayes and 19 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day, House File 1983. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1983, number 10 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to human services.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill defines a family and community and intervener. And you might say, what is an intervener? And if you think of this is dealing with deaf services for deaf-blind children, both deaf and blind, to develop the communication skills for them to learn, to interact with the world, and to become successful adults. If you think of the story of Helen Keller, probably the most famous deaf and blind person that most people have heard of, Anne Sullivan would have been her intervener. But from that story, Anne Sullivan was almost full-time. And unfortunately, there's a very big shortage of interveners to work with these children. I first learned of it by a young family in my district who had an infant who was both deaf and blind, and telling me the challenges of trying to establish a relationship and communicate with a child who can only experience the world through touch as a major person-to-person interaction, and how they felt their life was transformed and they were really starting to make progress with their son when an intervener came into their life, even just 5 hours a week, that made that big a difference. And there are about 375 children in the state of Minnesota who are both deaf and blind, and unfortunately we have had waiting lists, we've had limited hours and limited accessibility. The definitions and the clear training requirements in this will help us and other states to develop a clear definition of this role so that more places are encouraged to establish training programs and more people are challenged to go into this important work so that these children have the same opportunities as other children to learn, to interact with the world, and contribute their gifts. In the gallery today, we have Sally Prouty, who testified in support of this bill. She's a mother of a son who is both deaf and blind. But what was even more special about our hearing is we got to hear from her son, Andrew, and what a difference it made in his life. And he isn't here with us today because he's working. He's working full-time. He's now become an adult and achieved what we want to have happen for all children, no matter what the disabilities are that they have to overcome. And so I hope that you'll support me in advancing this career and making people more aware of it and helping us incent more people to step up to help these children so that they can have a full and enriched life.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1983.
Third reading. Discussion. Seeing no discussion to the bill, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the agenda is House File 990. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 990, number 11 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to financial institutions, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Carleton, Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. A special thanks to Representative Davids, O'Driscoll, and Howard for your early support on the bill. House File 990 is a federal conformity language that brings state law into line with federal law on what persons and what activities constitute mortgage origination. Minnesota's truth in lending law was originally drafted to conform with the then recently passed Dodd-Frank legislation. In fact, after the passage of Dodd-Frank, individuals with the manufactured housing industry reached out to Representative Barney Frank with concerns about the applicability of the federal law to their industry. At that time, Representative Frank responded that it was not his intent that Dodd-Frank apply to manufactured homes. I have a copy of that letter if anybody wants to see it at any time. Working with bipartisan members of Congress, changes to the Federal Truth in Lending Act laws were made in 2018, specifically concerning its applicability to the manufactured housing industry. House File 990 amends state law to make clear that manufactured home retail sellers and their employees are not mortgage loan originators simply because they answer questions about the existence of financing and the application process. This bill has been negotiated with the Department of Commerce with input from legal aid. There's a bright line as to what sellers can and can't do and what they must disclaim to buyers concerning any business affiliation with lenders. In short, this law treats those selling our state's most affordable, unsubsidized housing the same as other realtors, while maintaining buyers and consumer protections. I stand for questions and urge members' support.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 990.
Third reading. Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, Representative Sundin.
It's a terrific bill. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1840. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1840, number 12 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to commerce.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 1840 is some cleanup language from the mortgage crisis that occurred here in the state of Minnesota and across the United States beginning in about 2008. And what we have seen at the federal level and at the state level were a number of safeguards that were put in place to be able to help borrowers and lenders and to shore up the industry and how applications are taken, the credit standards, and the like. In our statute in Minnesota, we have a term that we have incorporated called subprime. And that term has a negative connotation in the marketplace, and as some Minnesota mortgage bankers attempt to sell their loans from the primary market as originators to the secondary mortgage market, we're finding that that can become somewhat problematic. So what we are doing is we're cleaning up the language in the mortgage statutes to take out the words subprime and to use language that still keeps the spirit and intent of the work that was done here in the state of Minnesota intact. Members and Madam Speaker, that is the extent of the bill this afternoon. Thank you.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 1840.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. The member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to Representative O'Driscoll for bringing an excellent bill. This is a common sense bill that deals with an unintended consequence. And I want to comment that there's peace in the valley here because it was brought by both Legal Aid and the Mortgage Association. And having exhausted all of the legislative cliches I can think of, I'd ask for a green vote.
Further discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 125 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. Announcements. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just an announcement, as lawmakers, it behooves us to get our hands on materials that will help us determine state law, policies, and procedures, especially when dealing with state subsidies to the entertainment industry or to our sporting facilities. So I just want to let you know, members, that I did pick up Pat Garofalo's book, The Billionaire Boondoggle. It really is an excellent book. I'm halfway through it now. The New York Times says Pat Garofalo's writing is straightforward, accurate, and a must-read. So, members, I encourage you to purchase Pat Garofalo's book, and if Representative Garofalo would sign my book after the session adjourns, I would be in great debt to him. So, again, the Boondoggle Billionaire. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Sandsteed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I would like to invite you to the social event of the session, which takes place tomorrow, the Iron Range Party at Mancini's, 6 o'clock. Hope to see you there.
The member from Aiken, Representative Lewick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just to follow on with that great announcement, just so you know, yet tomorrow, at Representative Eklund's office, my office, you can still get a ticket for that great affair at $20. At the door, it's $30. So save yourself $10. And here's what I'd recommend you do with the $10 that you save if you get your ticket tomorrow sometime. And that would be, when you get there, you'll be able to donate $10 to the Tommy Rukavina Scholarship Fund. So save $10, but don't be bashful and put a few bucks in that scholarship fund. So looking for a good, fun night tomorrow night.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The DFL members of the Judiciary Committee are going to meet 10 minutes after session adjourns in room 454 to talk about what we think the Republicans on the committee are going to talk about.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 9 a.m. Tuesday, April 9th, 2019.
Representative Winkler moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 9 a.m. Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Winkler moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. Tuesday, April 9th, 2019.